He's doing some tech.
Yes.
I won't get in the way.
All the background.
I'm not touching anything.
No,
We're almost streaming live. I think it says that we're streaming live now, so we should be good.
doing some
And
tech.
now I'm going to unpause recording and good, we're good. Streaming live.
He's doing some tech.
There. So now we're muted. We're good. We're all set. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Office Hours. I am Dave Meyer, along with John Arms. We are hosting together today. Hello, John. Super excited to see you. And of course, Suzi Hunn of Teach Your Thing. Hey, Suzi.
Hello.
Suzi, welcome to Office Hours. Welcome to the studio. What do you think of it so far?
Well, I know there's some high-tech stuff going on and some engaged conversations. So
Yeah.
that's what stood out to me so far. I'm
Great way
ready.
to spend a Friday afternoon. Fantastic
Absolutely,
way.
I'm ready.
So, well, hopefully we'll have more attendees on. So hello, folks, and to our attendees. You can use the Q&A function inside of Zoom to ask questions, but then later on, we will be turning on your microphones if you have specific questions for Suzi. You may know Suzi as the founder of Teach Your Thing. She helps small businesses create courses and signature talks, and she helps employees become entrepreneurs. Today, she'll be jamming with us about marketing and content creation. Like myself and John, she's a fan of inbound that puts the audience first, and she's not salesy. Her marketing values came from her 20 plus years as an educator. Let's jam with Suzi about her favorite philosophies for marketing content creation. All right, Suzi, you have
everybody.
the floor. We're so excited to hear from you.
Well, I'm so excited to be here. And I always say thank you for your time because our time is so valuable. And I could be talking about anything, but this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And so I love talking about it. And I think this could be fun too for questions for later. Maybe we could dig into some examples, but
Love it.
as Dave mentioned, I have a company called Teach Your Thing. And I started that because it combines my two favorite career loves. And the first is education. I have been an educator my whole career. I spent 15 years at the Minnesota History Center, a place that I still adore.
Love that. Love it.
Yeah,
don't they do an amazing job?
Honest to God, you can, I'm a history guy, and you can go in there and go to the visual records and like, oh, I want to see what Wilmer looked like in 1904. Like 30 pictures will show up. I mean, it's just amazing.
Oh, and you should see behind the scenes. They have a place that the staff sometimes calls the Raiders of the Lost Ark room because you go down into the basement. Have you ever been into the basement of the History Center?
No, I think Jason has. I have not.
Really?
Oh man, if you ever get a chance for a behind the scenes tour, if you picture how large the floors are up top, go down 2 floors. And there's that much space of archives and you can just see on and on. So anyway, it's an incredible place, but I did hit a glass ceiling there in my 40s. And at the time I had discovered a podcast for entrepreneurs called the Good Life Project podcast run by.
Who's that run by? Yeah.
Oh, he's an entrepreneur out of New York, Jonathan Fields.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
The Good Life.
Yeah.
Good Life Project.
Yep.
GLP, he calls it.
And that was transformational for you, huh?
Absolutely. I still credit that community for showing me the way to becoming an entrepreneur because I used to, when I was, kind of getting unhappy in my career, and again, nothing against the Minnesota History Center because I love it.
Yep.
But some of us have had times where our career was coming along and we thought it was wonderful and full of growth. And then somehow slowly over time, it's not full of growth anymore. Yeah. And I was in real deep pain around that for a time. And I used to ride my bike in the mornings before work and listen to the Jonathan Fields podcast. And these people talked about business in a fundamentally different way than I ever knew it as a Gen X woman. And they how people using their voice in new ways, leveraging media in the new economy, not adopting a kill or be killed strategy, but instead a community strategy. And so I started to think, what if I could start my own business? And that community really helped show me how. And so now I have had to learn a lot in my 40s. I'm not someone who grew up in an entrepreneurial family. I had to learn what it means to think like an entrepreneur. And so now I love teaching other people that.
Awesome.
And so my business combines education and entrepreneurship and put them together. So I help small businesses amplify their impact by teaching what they know. So I like to say, just because you know and love your thing doesn't mean you know how to teach it. And impact comes through empowering other people through your knowledge. And so I love finding out about my clients are such fascinating people who've developed subject matter expertise. And usually they know too much for their own good, which is a good thing.
Totally. Yeah. You're in a business for 25 years. You've learned a few things. What are some of the Suzi, teaching your thing, right? That's a pretty big subject. What are some of the common things that are like, all right, Suzi, we gotta take some information from our heads, put it into somebody else. Is it a lot of HR stuff? Is it tech stuff? What are the things that need to get taught for the small businesses that you help? What's often what you need to help people with?
That is an interesting question, because I have found in my years doing this that there's not as much commonality in the industry. There's not as much commonality in the verse as much as the process for how to narrow things down.
Okay.
But I would say, that being said, I would say there has been a common theme, especially among my clients, because I have a brand that attracts a certain type of person, and here's who they are. My clients are what I call loving disruptors.
Loving disruptors
who they know about a pain point, and a major one in their industry, where people are disempowered. There are structures in place that are no longer working. And so what's common among my clients is that they know a way to change that, and they're committed to making a difference. So I would say leadership and development is a common topic. Well, actually, marketing comes up a lot. That's not really the topic. It's more a common problem that my clients have, is how to take these big ideas, because these are big thinkers, usually, and knowing how to so what I talk to my clients about a lot, no matter what the industry is, and it varies. So I'll tell you some interesting examples. And again, not always commonalities in what they're teaching, but what is common is what the process they have to go through to narrow their content down. Because I always say, you want to teach this and you love all this stuff, and your learner needs this. So I can tell some cool examples.
Those are always good. What are the, so, it may be HR stuff, it might be science, whatever, right? But they're probably acting on some sort of pain point. Is it that they're growing and the transfer of knowledge has to move faster? What are the pain points that you're seeing out there that relate to teaching and moving information from point A to point B?
So I work with a lot of solopreneurs and small businesses, and a very common pain point for them is they are afraid to really own who they are. And I do think that is a problem with large companies too.
Totally, absolutely. Oh my God, it's a huge pain point.
And it is. And here's why I believe that it's such a huge problem is that we are still transitioning from, I'm going to back up a little bit and say, as a Gen Xer, I grew up, and we grew up in a world where there were traditional structures. There was organizational loyalty, And I was just yesterday, I had coffee with a millennial who was saying, my baby boomer mom is still trying to tell me that entrepreneurship is risky.
Yeah.
So we talked about how, and this relates directly to this common problem that the audience has about not owning who they are, is that when you are familiar, when you come from a world where there's structure and stability, then risk is very different than for a Gen Z or millennial who grew up in a world where there really wasn't that stability to begin with. So risk has a totally different meaning and definition. And so, but there's so many vestiges of the economy that you and I grew up in.
Yeah.
And companies and individuals are still really holding on to this idea that I have to look perfect. I have to have it all together. I'm trying to reach a mass market.
Fake it until you make it.
We no longer live in that world.
We don't.
Now we have to succeed. We live in an economy of infinite niches, not an economy of mass markets.
Yeah.
And purpose has replaced organizational loyalty for where we get structure and stability and fulfillment.
Yeah.
And because we, especially as Gen Xers, come from an age where like that world changed during our adult lives.
Right.
And we're all, even the millennial I was talking to yesterday, we're still functioning in a world that has so many vestiges of the economy that we came from. And so we're all trying to figure that out. So I would say, so those are the big ideas.
Right.
But the clients that I face really on a deep level struggle with. So I can just, and this leads to another, so I wanted to talk about philosophies today. So one of my philosophies is own your weird.
Love it.
Anything you can do in this niche economy to bring out something, sometimes, let's say you have two disparate things about yourself. If they are seemingly different and you put them together in your brand, that makes you kind of weird and different. And that's going to help your brand. And so, but it's hard. So I'll give an example from my own life of own your weird. By that, I mean anything that in that traditional economy may have been frowned upon, or that you like, maybe somebody's really quirky.
Yeah.
And that would have been frowned upon in the like, let's be buttoned up and professional and wear a suit. Whereas in this economy, if you've got funky, weird hair and have some sort of something that makes you weird, that might attract people. But I'll give a more subtle example.
It does. It's interesting. This moment of time we're in, and why you're on the show today, we are in a massive learning moment. What was is different. What is to be is in development and coming. And I often relate it to, do you remember the internet of 2000? Like, it's a thing. What was before that is gone. What it's, you know, the internet of 2000 was, I think we were still doing like dial tones and like, Dave, you have to get off because I got to get on the internet because there's not, and there's this middle point, right? Where we kind of all know where we're going. All the promise is there. The promise of the internet of 2000 is sort of in many ways manifested to today. But we're in this middle right now. And learning is on a massive curve because people are like, well, I really don't have to learn the old ways, right? You can have nostalgia, like you were saying, you know, somebody was saying something about, you know, taking chances is risky, the Gen X mindset, but it's the inverse now. Playing it safe, sticking around. I mean, it's the riskiest thing is not owning your weird. The riskiest thing is being anonymous. The riskiest thing is staying and giving too much to an entity that's not you. Those were super risky before. Work for the company, go all in, give them everything, right? That's not the world we live in anymore.
No.
And that's a good thing. That is a good thing.
I concur. And although probably all of us on this call know that intellectually, what I have found in my own life and with my clients, and I see here one of my favorite human beings and business owners is on the call who can give talks on this topic because she knows it. Talk about a loving disruptor. We have got a major loving disruptor on the call today. I'm so excited.
Good.
Perfect. And she has some questions for us too.
Oh, I know. I see this and I
Yes.
love to dig in. Pilar, I can't wait to dig into your question. But what I would say is among my clients, they know those things you were saying, John, on an intellectual, emotionally, and on a cellular level.
Mhm.
They've been so habituated. And this is a lot of what Pilar's work is about, is these structures that have internalized. And so I have had to do a lot of work, and I call it deep spiritual work, that's directly connected to succeeding as an entrepreneur in terms of really shedding a lot of those old ideas.
It takes time. It takes time. It really does. You know, there's look what's involved in it, right? It's familiar to me. The old ways are familiar to me. They're 30 years of familiarity, you know. It's hard to shed that. Nostalgia, right? Oh, those days were nice. I liked them. I made friends. We did things that I enjoyed. Those are tough things to overcome. You have to shed it, right? Like if we had nostalgia, I often use this comparison. You might have been very nostalgic for the horse when the car came around.
Mhm.
But the car won the game. You may have been very nostalgic for trains when airplanes came around, but the airplane won the game. And it's good to have nostalgia, but you have to look where forward is going and start to adjust yourself to where we're going. Nostalgia is great. Memories are great. Norms are great. But if ever there was a time in our life where we're transforming, we're in the middle, we're in the in-between, it is literally right now.
And to flip that on its head, absolutely, I am with you 100% on that. And to flip it onto the other side, the structures and hierarchies and gatekeepers that ruled the day when I was coming up in my early career and mid-career really benefited certain people in our population. And now there are plenty of people who've been marginalized by that.
Yep.
Have more access than they ever did before, and they in many ways would have reason not to be nostalgic about that hierarchical world that was really built for them anyway. And so one of my favorite things about these structures falling away is that there are fewer gatekeepers that are holding back.
That's a good point.
White dominant culture and the patriarchy are real, and that was a lot of what characterized that old structure. And so it wasn't great for everybody. And so now I love that there are more voices coming out, more opportunity to be able to access opportunity in new ways. So
are you teaching your thing out of that? Are people saying, hey, you know, talk about that a little bit as sort of
give
how
us
you're
some
teaching
tips
for the
and
new
tricks.
norm?
Yeah,
absolutely. I talk about that a lot in my own writing because I experienced it, and I'm happy to even talk about it here. I'm aware that as a white woman, I've experienced both sides of that coin. So as a blue-eyed, blonde, able-bodied, hetero woman, I have a lot of advantages that have made me able to walk into a store, and generally people think I'm up to good things. Nobody's going to come and ask me if I'm stealing something in a store when I walk into it. But somebody who doesn't look like me doesn't have that same advantage.
Right.
And on the other hand, as a woman, I have experienced having males be promoted so much faster than I ever was. My voice marginalized over and over again, people taking credit for my work. Like, I have had a lot of things happen that were not great. And so I do talk about both sides of that pretty openly in my work. And I think it's important. And I attract other people who are interested in that dialogue around how can we change the systems that aren't working.
Well, I wrote this last week. You know, this is an opportunity at this moment in time where we can really get it right. You know, the numbers, right? Like Dave and I, white males, right? I always like to say, people like us, we're on the 30-yard line in business from the start, just because of this. And that's not fair, right? And we're ahead of you because of our gender.
Yeah.
And that's not fair. And if you're Black or, Asian American or whatever, you don't get that advantage. And that basically played out in our work structure for the last 75 years. Women earning 72% of a man's check, African American, earning less. And it's like, okay, now we're moving into this new thing where you're right, there are less gatekeepers. So we can get this right. And it's not getting it right just out of a sense of justice. We have tamped down all of that expertise and knowledge and worldview by virtue of that. We have squeezed it out of the equation, and we're less for that.
And we're now ready to see an explosion in innovation because those voices are unmuted, right?
Absolutely. And they're still muted in a lot of ways, but there's so many more opportunities for them to be able to speak, and I love it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're all thrilled to see that happen.
Do you know Laura Best? Have you met Laura Best? She's got a thing. It's in town. For those of you listening, we host this out of the Twin Cities Market, Minneapolis, St. Paul. I think we're number 17 or something like that in markets in the U.S. We're pretty good size. But Laura Best has this thing called the Passion Collective, and it is dedicated to lifting women into their own power, which is one of the most beautiful missions I can ever imagine. She's here. And those are the kind of things. And then Nancy Corsa, who has Black Business Enterprises, same thing, lifting, African-American people into their own power. And I'm like, oh God, thank God there's room and space for this.
Absolutely.
There wasn't before.
It's happening. Well, and speaking of that, I would love to shift to, I love this question. You've got a couple of questions from Pilar. And so I'm trying to think which one to start with in here, but I guess we're kind of on the topic. I think it's a better segue to the second question that you asked, Pilar, about how, and I don't know if I can, maybe I will introduce Pilar. Like, should Pilar come on and do you want to come on and
I don't see why not. Pilar, if you're cool, let's I'm going to allow you to talk, so feel free. And Brian, I'll let you talk in too. So let's just make this a conversation.
All right.
And for the folks that are watching live over on YouTube, if you would like, just comment in and I will send you the link to join us and be able to talk live as well. So thanks to everyone for being here. And the first question that Pilar asked is actually one of my soapboxes. So I'm super excited to talk about both.
Okay, great. I can't wait. Thank you guys so much for having me, Suzi. I'm so glad to see you teaching your thing and inspiring others to teach theirs. Just a tiny bit of a backstory. I've known Suzi since my book came out in January. I was talking about my book, The Healthy Deviant, at the University of Minnesota's Center for Spirituality and Healing. And Suzi happened to be in the audience, came up with another contact we had in common. And within about 15 minutes was convincing me that I needed to create a community space for my followers and Healthy Deviant audience people. Thought I'd just start teaching it. I could maybe have a membership. And now I've done all those things, but I wouldn't have done any of them without Suzi's inspiration. So really grateful for the wisdom that she brings and also for that unique perspective that I really appreciate about Suzi. And I think you guys are sort of saying you maybe share, which is that there's just always been a gap for me between my desire to teach what I know, to teach my thing, and my kind of horror of having to market it or figure out the technology behind it, or it becoming a distasteful kind of pushing enterprise, none of which had anything to do with my own passions, which are much more mission driven. Let's change the world for the healthier and happier. So I guess I'll go to my second point, because it sounds like we can come back to my first point. Sure. Since I started doing this work, what has happened, which is sort of by surprise to me, is that a lot of folks who are taking my online courses and joining my membership have been voicing this very strong desire to bring this information back to their workplaces, where they say, well-being is such a problem, and most conventional corporate wellness initiatives are not really meeting or even coming close to meeting their needs. In fact, there's some obstacles to embracing them, anxiety about stigmatization of using them, and that they are not effective for their main problems or the root cause of those problems. So I'm finding myself in a unique, well, probably not that unique, but exciting moment for myself, which is I'm excited to do this, but I have never had a business to business kind of business. Until now, I've always gone pretty much directly to readers, listeners, consumers, if you want to call them that, humans, I prefer to call them. And I'm really realizing like most of what my limited marketing materials are don't speak directly to corporate relationships. And I'm not really sure the best way to initiate those relationships through my own existing pretty considerable contacts in business. I'm sure there's a million ways to do this, and I'm doing some of it falteringly, giving talks, for example. A lot of people will come up after those talks. But in an era where there's less of that going on, I'd love counsel on smart ways to begin to approach this, or even the questions I should be asking myself now.
Well, let me help you with that.
Great.
Because I can. There is a book. I'm going to post it in the chat.
Mhm.
It is called the Nonfiction Book Marketing Plan. And there it is. I published in July, my book. Super helpful tool. So Pilar, if the question is, how do I get my stuff out there, the Healthy Deviant, I highly recommend going to that book. A lot of great tips and tricks in there. Have you heard of the book?
I don't believe that I have. No, thank you.
It's a nice, easy, simple read. Do you teach at the U of M?
No, I mean, I just basically effectively one of those many guest faculty and I do this for other universities and conference centers and online schools. And while I am interested in marketing my book, it's really at this point, the book is more of a lead in to the other work I'm doing, which is like for most authors, much more remunerative. Teaching courses, the membership programs, really right now, it's about bringing people into existing experiences that I have, potentially in corporate cohorts or business units, but really disrupting corporate wellness is really where I'm about like, how do we begin to layer in a new set of offerings that are radically more appealing, address the root causes of business as it exists today, really start taking apart the ineffective assumptions behind most health improvement programs. And I think that those relationships with organizations, while my book will be handy, it's really probably more of a back of room sale or an additional benefit of being part of one of the programs than it is marketing the book itself. But the concept of the book for sure, Healthy Deviants, being healthy in an
Love the title. It's so awesome. I need a t-shirt that says Healthy Deviant. Gotta have it.
I have one. You can have one.
My God.
They're on my website.
Oh, you've got to go to Pilar's website and read her book. It is so good. You will love it because it matches your philosophy.
I'm going to order it today. I'm going to order it today. Suzi and Pilar, could you guys talk about, so what I'm hearing you guys saying, when it comes to corporate culture and norms, it sounds like you have to spend a good amount of time deconstructing what people are thinking and kind of how they come at it, because what's out there and what isn't working. Do I interpret that theme right?
From my point of view, absolutely. I would say it hasn't been working well for a very long time. And, it's in almost every sector. Our society, I talk about this in most of my work. Our society is an experiment right now. Our bodies and minds wired up the way they are from evolutionary biology, 2.5 million years of human history. The way we're living right now, this generation is the first generation in the history of humanity to be living this way. And most of the big business opportunities are, in my mind, clearing up the messes that we've made in the past couple hundred years, experimenting in ways that haven't served the vast majority of us. So, my work is really in this health and mindful mental health space, seeing the, people as whole people, not as disparate demographics and not as separate little tiny problems that each need separate tiny solutions. So it's a pretty holistic approach, much like all my work with Experience Life magazine and so on. But I feel like there's so many places ripe for disruption that I'm letting my audiences guide me to the places where they need me most, rather than trying to think from the top down, where should I go next? I'm trying to listen for them to tell me and follow where they tell me to go. But I have to acknowledge, like I said, my self-marketing has never been my strong suit. So once I have these things, I've made them. It's spent years making them. People love them. They're making a difference. How to begin those conversations or get visibility for my work in these places is sort of where I'm at right now.
And Pilar, I would love to give some thoughts, and I've written down, I have someone to introduce you to.
Oh, good.
I think she will have, I know she will have a fantastic answer to your question, because she, right in the thick of the pandemic, left her job to start a diversity and inclusion consulting company, and she's doing very well.
Excellent.
But one of the things that she has told me is that it was, I'm trying to think where to start with this, but defining who it is that she will work with has been critical, because she left a situation where she was, here's what I'll say. She wanted to disrupt what happens many times, where a diversity and inclusion specialist or team will come into a company, and the company wants to check off off the list and say, we did an anti-racism book club, so yay, we're anti-racist now.
Yeah.
And so she built her company to say, I will only work with organizations that engage me for at least 9 months. And she can tell you if that has changed or if I'm remembering that exact detail wrong. But the point is, she wants organizations to acknowledge what I'm doing is a deep exploration. It's not something that can be done in a single training. And so her business model weeds out a significant portion of people who might hire her and give her money, but she's so committed to the deeper cultural change. So that's one thing that
love that
you could think about. And then that just kind of leads to a debate that we could have about, when you're trying to change hearts and minds, do you start with the people who are farthest away from you on the spectrum, or do you work with people who are open? And I'm sure you probably have way more experience with this part of it than I do, Pilar, but I believe if I were going a business model around going into companies, and I'm thinking about this for the first time in my own business too, I would want to start with companies that already believe that it's possible, and not try to change the ones that are so far in the past that it's just going to be banging your head against the wall. But I don't know. That's just my own opinion, and I don't know if
no, that's super helpful, Suzi. And I think I agree with that. I definitely feel that the best client match for me, the best partner match, are going to be people who are like-minded, forward-thinking organizations who are willing, much like your other contact in the diversity inclusion space, to see this as a more integrated, long-term culture shift, not as a check the box. In fact, that's, like I said, one of the biggest problems with corporate wellness is it has been, much like diversity inclusion, a check the box. Well, we have this set of things that we do on Mondays and once a year, and that's not what we're talking about here. It's really a much bigger picture. So I think that's something you just gave me an idea about, though, is beyond like-minded in terms of values. I think like-minded in terms of visionary and change agents and leadership centered, like people who believe that leadership isn't just telling people what to do. It's setting a new course that's more promising for all of the folks in the organization, and servant leaders, people like that.
I think there's a framework around that can help, Pilar. And I'm sure you've heard of it, but inbound marketing, and kind of the idea of setting up a framework to engage exactly those best people, right? So you're setting up a buyer persona or an engagement persona of the people who most likely are going to champion the cause, especially as you move into B2B and into corporations. Yeah. And then you need to set up the fun part, and the tricky part about B2B is that it's very specifically tuned to relationships. And so what you need to do is give them a lot more feedback, a lot more detail. Every B2B sale, every engagement, if you're going to come in as a consultant for a large scale organization, a B2B sale takes 80 clicks before anyone calls or contacts you. And so your job is to come up with as much supporting material and information to make that engagement a foregone conclusion. You already have something amazing for an inbound onboarding process. You have your book, which is an amazing inbound asset. It's something that people are going to buy, they're going to read it, and they're going to be bought in to you and to the story and to the cause. And so next you want to start giving them additional choices to bring them down that path until they essentially sell themselves that they need to contact you. So part of the example that Susie brought up, if you go to the website of the person that you mentioned before, and I'm completely spacing her name, but I only work with companies that are taking this seriously. So if you go to a page and it says, are you ready to take this seriously? Yes or no? No, it takes you out to the YouTube channel or something. Yes, it sends you to set a schedule or schedule a meeting. So
Cool.
how do you keep cultivating a
Well,
relationship?
Let me, sorry, go ahead, Susie.
Well, I was just going to say the other thing that when I introduced, and I didn't mention her just because we're on a YouTube channel and maybe she would know the username,
Right.
I don't know. But one of the things that I think she could also speak to, Pilar, that I think might help is once she's engaged in organization, she has come up on resistance where everyone at the beginning says, yes, we believe in this. And then a few months in, that's when she starts to really encounter the resistance. And so anyway, I know that there will probably need to be strategies you'll want to implement for how to manage that if and when that happens too. So
allow me to help with that for everybody watching. Because in the small business world, right, and in the startup world, the entrepreneur world, there's a couple of things to think about. It's very often that we think thematically first. What's the big message? What's the thing? All of that. We tend to think less of programmatically, like what's the structure upon which I do these things. And so, Pilar, in your inbox on LinkedIn, I sent this to you, and Susie, I can send this to you as well. For businesses of smallish sizes, basically, I think anything off the Fortune 2000. I learned a big lesson this week is let's not go past the obvious. Let's not overcomplicate things, targeting, thinking through the stages of what your customer has to go to. It's actually pretty simple if we don't let it get ourselves over our skis. So I'm going to share a little thing here. This is a tool that we supply our members because they're like, what do I do this on top of? Okay, hold on a minute. I can't. Dave, I'm going to share something. I think I'm going to share something.
You're golden. You're up.
Am I? All right. Yep. All right. I'm doing techie stuff here, you guys. So are you seeing a Excel spreadsheet?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. So most of the world can work, and I'm not going to belabor this, but what we're all dealing with is where's that population and how do I get in front of them? After I do that, where am I connecting with them in that middle part? And then third, how are we getting together, right? This is operational stuff. This is programmatic things. It's not the same. This isn't for Coke and Pepsi and IBM. This is for 1 and 2 and 10 person organizations like yourself. You have to get through these gateways with your customers. So this is the programmatic thing. I encourage anybody, use this. Don't overcomplicate things. Don't go buy a big, expensive tool. Just keep it on a spreadsheet. But you do have to do the discipline of this. So that's in your inbox. And if anybody else needs it, like my marketing is random, and I'm thinking very thematically, but I'm not thinking programmatically, please use this. It helps everybody with their relationship building and sales. So I'm gonna stop sharing on that. But if the question is, how do I do this at my level, the 1 or 2 person level, there's a really, really good answer right there.
Great.
Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you.
Yep, it's in your inbox. It's in your inbox. I was doing all sorts of finger stuff, LinkedIn, connecting, and all this kind of stuff.
Love it.
But it really does work. We've got 230-ish members in Voyager now, and those who use it really, really do well. So I encourage you to grab that tool and use it on your behalf.
Super. Thank you. That's great advice.
While you were doing your finger stuff, I was checking out the Healthy Deviant t-shirts, which I did not know existed either.
Yeah, I love them.
So
I'm all in. After this, I'm gonna go order mine.
I love it. I'll offer an invitation to any of you, since you've given me so much great advice. I am doing a bunch of fun things, and one is tomorrow. It's how to create a healthy deviant self-care plan in 1 hour in real time. If you're interested, Susie, let me know. I'll hook you guys up and you can come and check it out. Yeah, it's really fun.
Nice.
Cool.
Nice.
I'm sure it'll be great. Well, and I wonder if Dave, you were saying you had an answer to Pilar's first question, but I also wondered if Brian, do you have any questions or thoughts?
Brian Newman, Bill,
multitasking.
he's gonna he's fumbling frantically to get off of his mute button.
Okay.
He may have even walked to the fridge and grabbed himself a cold pop.
Okay.
Right, right.
But he always has great questions, and when he comes off of mute, we'll hear them. Suzi, can you talk a little more about this moment we're in terms of helping people teach their thing and deconstructing the norms? I think this is very important. I think we're at a moment here when we have to get into that.
Yeah. Yes, one of the other ones, so I had come up with 4 philosophies that I talk about in terms of content marketing that have really helped my clients. And so one of them is, I'm going to start with a pet peeve of mine about today's business economy, which is put yourself out there. And you hear that a lot in terms of social media in particular. And so I have just found that that phrase drives me nuts for a variety of reasons.
Are you talking about the grinding thing and work extra and just go nuts? Or is it more take the risk and put yourself out there?
That's a good question. I would say more the second. So what I was referring to is when it comes to content creation and marketing.
Yeah.
Often what people encounter is I've created this program and then there are crickets, or, I just feel like I'm working so hard. And so someone might come in and give the business advice. You need to just put yourself out there in terms of, yes, being seen and visible. And a lot of my clients, who tend to be women. I don't only work with women, but I do attract a lot of women and or new business owners. So this idea of being visible and seen is important. And it is a skill of today's economy to put yourself out there. Yes. So I agree with that part of the phrase. But where I have decided I don't like it is that if all you're thinking is I need to put myself out there and then everyone's going to come rushing to my programs, is that we're forgetting that there's a dialogue instead. So when you're creating content for inbound marketing, and Pilar happens to do this really well, but instead just thinking, oh no, I'm going to put this perfect looking picture of myself out there. Talk about messages, talk about ideas, talk about alignment with your people instead of, it's not just about yourself. It's not just a singular act. It is a dialogue. And so that's one thing that I always want clients to be thinking about when I work with them to create any sort of training or marketing, which is any piece of content is always a dialogue.
Oh my God.
You think about content as a put yourself out there, that's pushing, that's not inbound. So how can we think in terms of dialogue? And so I could show, if you'd like, I had pulled up a couple of examples of content that I've created or that I've created with and for clients, just to kind of give examples of what I mean when I say that.
Yeah. I want to talk about this dialogue piece more.
So I will share my screen and just give some examples. So this is just one that's kind of funny. This is a piece of social media I created. And this is a way that I say I was creating a dialogue. I happen to be, okay, I'm gonna back up and say, I grew up in Austin, Texas. And there, Matthew McConaughey is kind of a legend and an icon. And so I follow him on social media. Yeah. Well, I don't know how many of you follow him or even care, but several months, you may have heard people were giving buzz around him running for governor of Texas. And then
I did hear that, yeah.
So I was following him when he announced that he was not, in fact, going to run for governor. And on that day, I had to admit, I was like, actually, Matthew McConaughey said some really interesting things that meet my philosophy as a business owner. And these are all things. And so what I did was I have this structure for social media. And I've had this several times in other ways to create a dialogue. But I was just saying, hey, I was just watching Matthew McConaughey on my Instagram, and he actually described several things that I've had to learn from entrepreneurship that I didn't know when I worked for someone else. And so anyway, I just put 5 ways he got it right without becoming a politician. He talked about you really have to know yourself. And that's what I was talking about earlier about bring your purpose. Determining your best path takes time. Like I loved how I really admired him for saying, hey, there's more than one path to making a difference in the world. And I've had to think about this for a while. And that message was very disruptive of this common belief in our society that everybody just has to know the answers all the time. Like he had to think about whether he was going to run for a while. But anyway, this was just one small example that I just thought was funny. And I actually banged this out really fast on Canva because I'd already created the structure. So that's just one way. And here's an example of how I started this actually.
I'm jealous, by the way, of how clean your Canva is. I'm jealous.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I really love design and I am a huge fan of Canva. And I like to say just because everyone can access Canva doesn't mean you're good at Canva. And I really love
It's just so clean and organized.
Yeah. Well, this is just my this folder, you mean, or the design?
No, your Canva like canvas, when you close this and it goes to Canva.
I'm like, yeah, actually,
look how clean that is.
I see. Oh no, this is my Google Drive where I've organized my files. Another whole topic. But this is another way that I, instead of putting myself, actually, this demonstrates another of my content marketing philosophies, which is build your business in public. And I actually got that idea from this book, The Minimalist Entrepreneur. I don't know if any of you have heard of this, but Sahil Lavinia, probably butchered his name there, but he talks about how business owners need to get over their fears about acting perfect all the time. And he's like, build your business in public. And this is just a micro way that I did that. But I was part of a mastermind group. And after I got off the call from the mastermind group, I just made a list of 5 things that the mastermind group discussed. And I went on social media and I'm like, hey, I just got off this interesting call and I learned so much from my mastermind group of women business owners. Here are some things that we talked about today. And so then I had a longer description in my social media where I acknowledge that I'm still learning and I really appreciate this community of people who are teaching me. And here's just some quick bullets, snack sized. I know John and Dave, you like to talk about snack size.
Gotta keep it snack size, otherwise it doesn't get eaten.
This single social media post was my summary of a 90-minute mastermind call. It took me probably 20 minutes, maybe a half hour to design it after I got off the call, probably not even that long. And then I just posted it. And this is a way to build your business in public. Like, what are the things you're doing all the time? How can you talk about that as you go? So, and I will just share, here's another example of that. I give discovery calls all the time. And so I will just take that 1 hour long that I just had from a client, and I'll take one thing that got pulled from that conversation that I taught the person. And I just say, what was that one takeaway from a discovery call I just led? And then this took probably 5 minutes. Once I created the base design in Canva, I just use that. And so I just think there are ways that people get caught up in thinking content has to be all this big stuff, where sometimes it's like, distill it down, make it designed and pretty, and pump it out there. So those are just some ideas that I wanted to share.
When I talk next week at the Digital Summit, that's Canva is one of the tools that I'm pulling out, saying where tech is going for fractional and small business. The tool set, there's too much tooling out there. We have too many switches, too many knobs, too many options. So take it down. And as people who aren't running large enterprises, we really need a smaller set and a simpler set. The economy is really going to demand that of us. We're moving closer to 40% of our workforce point being 1099. We just don't have the capacity or even desire to operate on too complicated of a tech stack. Canva's going to be in there. I think they're, when they first came out as a design tool, but they're now just, I don't know. I just think they're brilliant. They're looking at project management. They're looking at video. They're looking at academics. I'm like, oh my God, Melanie Perkins, one of my heroes.
I cannot get over, and I don't do affiliate marketing, but if there's any company and I've thought about it, I might actually sign up to be an affiliate for Canva because I believe in what they do so much. And
do they have it? Do they have an affiliate program?
They do.
Oh,
yeah. But I've never taken the time to mess with it, but I always think about it because
time is a commodity in short supply. The things that you spend time with have to be. I was even opening up this morning. I'd like to go outside, have a cup of coffee, all that. And I'm like, I'm just being real thoughtful. I'm like, there's 50 things I can look at 7 a.m.
Right.
I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to be thoughtful and take my time and spend time on one or two.
Right.
Which is a great segue to what I love this other question you asked, Pilar, about my biggest pain point is how to quit creating more content and start more effectively marketing and selling and packaging what I have. I know, or at least I think, Pilar, you've already done a lot of that, given from when we first started, but it's a constant challenge for me too. And I wish I could say I have an easy answer to this, but one is, in some ways, I just give myself permission to create certain kinds of content. And I've given myself permission to create the content that's really fun and light and easy for me and stop creating the content that takes a lot of work and feels draining.
Sure.
That's one thing that I've chosen to do. So for me, actually, I guess I have dealt with this more than I was giving myself credit for. But for me, visuals are fun. And so that's why I love Canva so much. And I've given myself permission to actually let go of client relationships that involve really, really deep instructional design. And now if the people want if people want visual designs, I do more of that and less of things that just need to be done in like Word. So how you would have work is to be aware of what drains your energy. And I know you know that's what your work is about. And give yourself permission to do more of the parts that lights you up. But it sounded like Dave had another way to approach that.
Well, I think for most content in marketing and engaging and in sales conversations, you really need to focus first on who you're trying to reach and making sure that you're optimizing for those people, right? So Pilar, if you're going more corporate and trying to engage in finding those HR managers, the hiring folks that are actually interested in affecting change for their organizations, then you want to focus on where those people hang out and focus your content on the kinds of things that they're struggling with. And so that gives you an instant yes, no. And is it going to engage the people that I want to work with? Yes or no. And if it's no, then I'm not going to do it. But if it's yes, then I'm going to use it. And I'm also going to put it into a framework and a structure where it doesn't just go into the ether. You're not just creating content for creating content's sake, but you're putting it into a framework where it's engaging and you're connecting people. And it's part of a workflow per se, where almost like a choose your own adventure, right? So if someone identifies as the person that you're trying to reach, they respond to one of your posts over LinkedIn or social media. Sorry, Suzi, getting themselves out there and putting content out where they know it's going to be grabbed by the people that matter most, then you can give them more of that through a considered process of additional email saying, here's the next blog post in this, or I know that folks that are struggling with inclusion and creativity and, being healthy deviants, that this is another deviant topic that most of my readers are interested in. And so giving them that and putting it into a framework and into content in a couple of weeks as a quick promo, we're having Patty Radford Henderson of Annam. She has a omni-channel marketing calendar tool that helps put all of this in and kind of visualize where all of that stuff goes. John, get ready to do a shot. It's HubSpot is the tool that I use for that. We have a running joke on office hours. Every time Dave says HubSpot, we have to do a shot. But it's just having a tool and a framework that you can use to create and engage a process to draw those folks in and to encourage them in conversation, maybe without even ever talking to them, is a fantastic way to know when to and when not to create that content.
Dave, you're talking about, and by the way, when you say take a shot about HubSpot, you mean I'm supposed to take a cheap shot, or you're supposed to take a shot at tequila? I can't remember.
Well, whatever is on the desk right now, it's coffee for me to keep the rest of the afternoon.
So when you talk about that, Dave, you're talking about a very considered approach, right? If somebody responds to X, a thoughtful back. And Suzi, you were talking about this, right? The dialogue, right? It's a two-way dialogue, and we want that. We need that. I think in the small business sector, it's hard, right? How many people can you have intimate dialogue with? And how do you choose those? Can you guys talk about that? Because I think people think that can be automated, but there's some struggles there, right? If Suzi tells me, I really want to talk to you about this thing, and it's really important to me, right, I can't hear that in her voice if I sent her an automatic email. So maybe you two guys can talk about where are we with facilitating that at the small business size level? Because I find it hard.
And the other thing I wonder about, and I'm noticing the time, like, are we?
Holy crap, it goes so fast.
Yeah, it streams on by. And thanks for the conversation with everybody. I think we're going to have to set up a part 2 for Suzi.
Hey, all right. Yeah, when we're into the fall, and I'm up for it.
So final point goes to you, Suzi. What were you going to say about that, about dialogue?
Oh, well, I was wanting to dig deeper into Pilar's
You still got 2 minutes.
But I would say, okay, I'm going to say, so often there's a practical answer to a question, and other times there's a spiritual answer to the question. I was kind of leaning spiritual with this one, and we don't have time to solve it, but I was wondering, when you're creating more and more content and not effectively marketing what you've already created, what is it that's causing that? Is it because you feel like you need to constantly prove yourself? Or is it because it's fun for you to create new content? We don't know the answer right now, but I was just going to dig deeper into that. And I would say on my own journey, I have had to address both of those sides. So for me, creating content is fun. So to some degree, I need to figure out, how can I create a business model that allows me to continue to create content, because that's what gives me joy. On the other side of it, there's only so much time we have in every day. So what is it that you would rather be spending time on that's going to feed you? And to what degree are you getting pulled into things that other people want you to do because you're people pleasing? Is that happening? I don't know. But in my case, I've had to dig into those kind of deep spiritual answers in order to get to, hey, what I already created still has value, and my value, I'm spending too much time doing other things that are really devaluing me because I feel like I have to prove myself. So it's not an easy answer.
I would love to do a deep dive on, there's the clinical answer and there's the spiritual answer. I know which one I'd like to spend time on. We are at the hour. Unbelievable. It always goes so fast.
Well, this was fun.
Thank you so much, Suzi. And it's been a delight. Thanks to Pilar and Brian for joining us as well. Thanks, of course, always to John. I'm going to stop the live stream and the recording, but